Okay, so this is the nice relaxed part of the podcast where we get to speak to our guest about the first date questions. That's if you went on a first date with a techie nerd, the sort of questions that he'd ask to get to know you a little bit better. The first question that I'd like to ask you, Tom, is what was your first computer?
So my first computer was the original IBM PC, which came out in the early 1980s. Apple and IBM were the first. Apple came out with a machine that was in um, low production quantity, and IBM quickly saw the potential, and they opened up a new division to produce the original IBM PCs. They think they had their manufacturing down in Palm Beach, Florida. And I was working for a large corporation at the time, and they were willing to help employees purchase their first PC.
Right.
But there was an old adage: you can't go wrong as a corporation employee buying an IBM. So they made an institutional decision that they would give you an interest-free loan to buy a computer, but it needed to be an IBM. It wasn't going to be an Apple. So I bought the first PC, and I learned to use it, but it was a struggle. I hated the fact that there were so many manuals and it was so non-intuitive. So as quickly as I could in 1984, I purchased my first Mac. And I still have that Mac. I have all the software and cabling that goes with it, and it's sitting in my garage and carefully packed away, and I'll bet if I plugged it in, I could power it up. So
Sounds like me and my first computer. I've still got my Spectrum 48K. I still power that up every few years and play a few old games. Because that's the interesting thing with something like the PC. It seems so powerful, and you sold that dream, and obviously your company was sold that dream. But when you actually first get it, you're like, I can't actually do anything with it.
Yeah, well, I got into flight simulators very heavily at that point in time. I will say it was obvious it was a productivity tool, but you really needed to figure out how to apply it to get the value out of it at that point. It's much more intuitive today.
Okay, my next question is, what is your favorite piece of software or application at the moment?
I'm going to give you a generic answer to that question, and I hope it's helpful and satisfying to some people. One of the people I got to know at SRI was a fellow named Doug Engelbart, and Doug was the original patent holder, along with SRI, of the mouse. He was the one who gave the demo. I think I mentioned earlier in our conversation, the mother of all demos, hypertext graphical user interface. In 1962, Doug had written a paper for the U.S. government on how to use the computer to augment human capability. And that was at a time when all computers did was run payroll, and there were big machines that sat in the lobby with a lot of lights that flashed. And his thing was using it to augment human capability. And if I think across the decades that I've had with the computer, with a personal computer, there have been just different phases. I mean, as a finance guy, I was always doing spreadsheets, right? And when you do a spreadsheet and you're developing a budget, the numbers on all the spreadsheets, the typed spreadsheets, are constantly changing. My secretary, my admin assistant, once we were halfway through the budget cycle, would take one of my budget original pages and hold it up to the light, and it was just pockmarked with all this whiteout that had been put over the numbers that I had changed over time. And the sheet was almost brittle. And the fact that the original VisiCalc, which preceded Excel, you could just go in and change numbers. The fact that you could, the way I create text is I will get a rough version of it down, and then I'll forever be taking passes through it and playing with the words and editing it. And the fact that you could do that without having to start from scratch. So right at the very beginning, I would have said, wow, this is an amazing piece of productivity. And I could take that same thing up through the generations. And anytime there was a piece of software that allowed me to do something faster, better, uh, uh, more quickly, and allowed me to collaborate with other people, um, you know, the, I don't know if you went to business school, but one of the tools they use in business school are the Harvard case studies. And
I went to basically the Harvard of the UK, Aston University. I don't think most people class it as the Harvard of the UK, but they'll be glad that I said that.
so many times, I'd get a case study that had been Xeroxed by my boss where they'd list 15 different names and they put, this sounds good to me, what do you think? And they'd send Xerox copies of that out, and over the course of a couple of weeks, they'd get some sort of a response. The fact that these days you can take the equivalent of that and you can communicate it instantaneously to a group of people, you can get feedback instantaneously, and you can begin to collaborate on doing something with that. So it's the communications aspect of it. The computer itself evolved, the whole client server thing that came along, which allowed you to do things standalone and then interact with something more powerful to get bigger needs calculated, and then allowed you to interact with other people. So to me, what efficiency meant has evolved over time. But if it kept moving the ball forward in terms of my productivity, I was all for it. And I don't think that's stopped. I mean, there are tools today that could evaluate threat assessments. I mean, I've seen, if you think about the human cell and you think about the progress that we're making, I happen to serve on a board of a medical research institute that Jennifer Doudna serves on. She's the woman who just won the Nobel for inventing the CRISPR, it's gene editing technology. And if you look at all the software tools that surround the modeling and science, life science at that level, and how far that's come, and what that enables people in her field to do. We don't have to do everything through wet chemistry and wet biology anymore. We can simulate the outcome of certain things, and we can, whether it's testing a new drug, we can figure out how, 500 diseases will react to this one drug overnight. So I think it's that productivity, and I think we're on a multi-decade path, and it's still moving, and I think that's exciting.
Definitely, and accelerating. Next question would be, what was your best tech purchase for the last 12 months?
So I'll give you two answers. One of them is I love my flat screen television, and I bought a Pioneer Plasma about 20 years ago when flat screens first came out, and that one failed one day because a hole burned in the center of it that just got bigger and bigger, and then I had to take that 50-inch and replace it with a 65-inch Sony LCD. And I had that one for about a decade, and then that one fails in a different way. You start to get lines across it, and parts of it start to go dark. And I went out about 6 months ago shopping for a new screen, and I wound up with a 77-inch LG OLED. And that's the one all the write-ups of, the one that I have is not curved, but it's actually sitting right there on the wall behind me. But it's wonderful. I mean, the resolution is off the chart, and so I figure the next television is going to be a holodeck.
Probably, yeah.
My favorite purchase this year was that. I will say that another one that made the list was a gift that I got at Christmas, and that's the little Apple tags. That I can't see myself making another trip without putting one of those in each of my suitcases, just to make sure I know where it is. I wish they would come out with one that's small enough to attach to my eyeglasses and things that I'm losing all the time. But I think, good for Apple. I think they've come out with another winner there.
So with those tags, can you see that it's like just about to come onto the conveyor belt when you land?
I haven't actually tried to use it yet outside of my house.
Right.
So, the fact that I can sync it up and on my iPhone detect where it is, and it's the fact that Apple can tap into that global worldwide Bluetooth network, and
Yeah.
use that to deliver a useful service to me without intruding on anybody's individual privacy as to location data. I think that's a useful way to think about things. So very helpful.
Definitely. So the opposite of that, in Concise Conversations, we have Room 202, which is nothing to do with Room 101, but Room 202. So what item of technology would you put into Room 202? You'd get rid of it. You don't think it deserves to exist.
Wow. I've never. I have replaced a lot of things because there was something better out there. Um, the only thing that I'm going to give you another generic answer, and I'm going to tell you that anything that is not intuitive,
Right.
there are some people whose mind is focused on reading thick manuals and working their way through, um, you know, 75-page user manuals, and that's not me. There was a commercial 20 years ago where a kid is sitting with his father who's trying to hook up their new computer, and he's clearly been at it for a while and he's not being successful. And the kid finally puts on his jacket and he's walking out the door and he says, "I'm on my way over to Steve's house. They've got a Mac." And so, to me, if it's intuitive and useful, I'm with it. If it's not, I guess that would be my candidate for the Room
Yeah.
101.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff gets thrown straight in there. Can't use it. It's in. And then finally, I've got to ask you. You've already told me that you don't really use keyboard shortcuts, and I thought about that, and it's like, of course not. One of the developers of Siri is not going to be using keyboard shortcuts. It's going to all be voice activated. But are there any? Is that why you've not got a favorite keyboard shortcut? Because you've not used one since voice recognition came in?
It's interesting. I will tell you that in the development of Siri, two decisions were not made at the time we started Siri. One of them is it was not clear that it was going to be aimed mainly at mobile devices, as opposed to
Right.
your computer on your desktop, because Siri could work on your desktop just as well as it could work at a mobile device. The second decision that wasn't made initially was that it was going to be voice activated, because you could literally interface with Siri with
Right.
with a keyboard. So the decision to go with voice activated and on a um, on a mobile device was made late in the game. And but observe today that this computer, which is a desktop laptop, has got Siri on it, and I use that sometimes, but sometimes I'm still using the keyboard. So
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tom. That's been great getting to know you a little bit better.
Bob, this is terrific, and I applaud it. I've looked at some of the other episodes, and I look forward to tracking them in the future.
Brilliant.
I've enjoyed it too.